You walk into a room. Someone glances up, then looks away. Nobody says your name. You sit down, and for the next few minutes, it's like you're not really there. It stings more than it should. Why? For most of human history, this wasn't a minor social awkwardness. It was one of the most dangerous things that could happen to you. Your brain still hasn't gotten the memo. Somewhere inside you right now is a warning system built over hundreds of thousands of years for a single purpose: to make sure you never got left behind by the group. Not metaphorically left behind. Literally. Physically. Alone. In a landscape with no locks on the doors, no hospitals, no grocery stores, and no chance of surviving more than a few days without other people. That system is still running. It just doesn't know the room you walked into today isn't a savanna. Let's start with the science, because this isn't just a feeling. It's measurable. In 2003, a psychologist named Naomi Eisenberger ran an experiment that changed how researchers think about social pain. She put people into an fMRI scanner, a machine that images which regions of the brain are active in real time, and had them play a simple ball-tossing game with two other players. What the participants didn't know was that the other two players weren't real. They were computer-controlled, programmed to eventually stop passing the ball to the person in the scanner. Just excluded. Frozen out of a game that meant nothing. The brain scans told a different story than meant nothing. When people were excluded, a region called the anterior cingulate cortex lit up. That's the same region that activates when you stub your toe or burn your hand. Eisenberger's conclusion was blunt. Social rejection is processed by your brain using some of the same machinery as physical pain. Being ignored doesn't just feel bad. On a neurological level, it can register as an injury. That's strange. If you stop and think about it, why would getting cut out of a ball game with strangers you'll never see again light up the same alarm system as touching a hot stove? Evolution tends to be lazy in a useful way. It rarely builds an entirely new alarm system from scratch when an old one can simply be repurposed. Physical pain already existed as a fast, hard-to-ignore signal that something is wrong and needs immediate attention. Eisenberger's theory is that, somewhere along the evolutionary timeline, the same circuitry got recruited for a second job, flagging social injuries with the same urgency as physical ones. For a species that couldn't survive alone, a threat to your place in the group was arguably more dangerous than a scraped knee. So the brain didn't invent a new warning light. It just wired the old one to a second switch. The answer takes you back further than the psychology lab. It takes you back to the environment your brain was actually built for. For roughly 300,000 years, Homo sapiens lived in small, tightly bonded groups. Not cities, not nations. Bands, typically somewhere between 20 and 50 people, who hunted together, gathered together, raised children together, and depended on each other for every single resource that kept them alive. There was no surplus stored in a warehouse, no emergency fund, no stranger you could call for help. If you were cast out of that group, for stealing, for lying, for simply becoming a burden, you weren't facing embarrassment. You were facing a landscape with predators, exposure, and starvation, and no one watching your back. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar has spent decades studying exactly how these ancestral group sizes shaped the human brain. His research on what's now called the social brain hypothesis argues that the unusually large neocortex, the outer layer of your brain responsible for complex thought, evolved specifically to manage the intense social demands of tracking relationships, obligations, and reputations within a group. Dunbar's number, the now famous estimate that humans can maintain roughly 150 stable social relationships, comes directly from this research. Your brain isn't just capable of complex social tracking, it's built around it. Being noticed, remembered, and included by your group wasn't a bonus feature. It was close to the entire operating system. So picture it. A member of one of these ancestral bands does something the group disapproves of. Maybe they hoard meat instead of sharing it, which anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, like the Juhunsi San of the Kalahari, have documented as one of the most severely punished violations, because food sharing was the insurance system that kept everyone alive during lean periods. Now watch what actually happens to that person. Not a spear, not a beating, something quieter and in some ways crueler. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm spent years studying how small-scale societies without chiefs or police still manage to keep powerful, selfish, or dangerous individuals in check. His research describes a pattern he calls reverse dominance hierarchy, where the group as a whole holds power over any single member who threatens the balance, and the group's favorite weapon isn't violence, it's withdrawal. Gossip turns against the person behind their back. Eye contact stops. Invitations to the hunt quietly dry up. Boehm found this pattern across dozens of documented foraging societies on nearly every continent, which suggests it isn't a cultural quirk. It's closer to a universal human tool, one so old it likely predates agriculture, cities, and writing by tens of thousands of years. Picture what that felt like from the inside. You wake up in camp. The fire from the night before is still smoking, and nobody meets your eyes. Conversations that used to include you now happen a few feet away, in tones just quiet enough that you can't quite catch the words. You offer to help carry water, and someone else quietly steps in first. Nothing dramatic happens. No one shouts, and that's exactly what makes it so unbearable. There's no fight to win, no wrong to right, no clear moment to apologize for. Just a slow, deliberate erasure. And every hour of it is a signal that your place in the group, the only thing standing between you and the wilderness, is dissolving. Psychologist Kipling Williams, who has studied this exact phenomenon for over 3 decades, calls it ostracism, and he's found something remarkable. This silent treatment is arguably more devastating to a person's well-being than direct verbal conflict. In his research, using a virtual ball-tossing game he designed called Cyberball, essentially a digital version of Eisenberger's original setup, Williams found that even brief, meaningless exclusion by total strangers online triggers measurable distress, lowered mood, and a drop in feelings of belonging and self-worth. Participants knew, rationally, that the game didn't matter. Their nervous system disagreed anyway. Williams later found the effect held up almost universally, across age groups, cultures, and even when participants were told the other players were computer programs, not people at all. Knowing the rejection is meaningless does almost nothing to soften it. Here's the counterintuitive part. You'd expect a punch or an insult to hurt more than silence. It doesn't work that way. Being yelled at least confirms you still matter enough to provoke a reaction. Being ignored offers no information at all. It leaves your ancient threat detection system running in the dark, unable to calculate the size of the danger, which, if you think about how that system evolved, is exactly the scenario it fears most. In the ancestral environment, ambiguous social signals were often more dangerous than clear ones, because they gave you no way to prepare, negotiate, or repair the relationship before the consequences arrived. A clear insult is a problem you can respond to. Silence is a problem you can't even locate. This is why the silent treatment feels so uniquely unbearable. It's not really about the silence itself. It's about your nervous system reading that silence as the opening move of abandonment. The exact event evolution spent hundreds of thousands of years training you to avoid at almost any cost. Now reconstruct what happened next. Back then, for a person sliding toward exclusion, every part of their behavior would likely shift, almost involuntarily. They become hyper-attentive to the group's mood, scanning faces for the smallest sign of a thaw. They'd overcorrect, offering extra food, extra effort, extra deference, doing almost anything to re-earn a place inside the circle of people who kept the fire going and watched for danger at night. That desperate, anxious scanning wasn't weakness. It was one of the most adaptive behaviors a person could display, because reintegration meant survival, and continued exclusion meant a slow, exposed death, usually not from a predator's attack, but from the compounding disadvantage of doing everything alone, gathering alone, defending against danger alone, raising a child alone, in an environment engineered around cooperation. You felt a distant cousin of that exact instinct. The compulsive urge to check your phone after sending a message that got left on read. The replaying of a conversation, wondering what you said wrong. The disproportionate relief when someone finally responds. None of that is irrational. It's an ancient survival circuit, still fully wired, firing off in response to a threat that, in the modern world, usually isn't a threat at all. And that's the twist worth sitting with. The feeling itself hasn't changed in tens of thousands of years. Only the stakes have. Being excluded from a group chat costs you nothing you need to survive the night. Being excluded from a Paleolithic hunting band could cost you your life within a week. Your brain, however, can't tell the difference between those two situations from the inside. It runs the identical alarm either way, because it was never built to distinguish socially uncomfortable from existentially dangerous. For nearly all of human history, those two things were the same thing. This mismatch has a name among researchers who study it. Evolutionary mismatch. The idea that a trait shaped by an ancestral environment can become miscalibrated, sometimes even harmful, once the environment radically changes. Your appetite for salt, sugar, and fat evolved in a world of scarcity and now collides with a world of abundance. Your alarm system for social exclusion evolved in a world where being ignored genuinely predicted death, and now it collides with a world of muted group chats, unanswered texts, and strangers on the internet who forget you exist within seconds. The wiring is ancient. The world it's reacting to is not. Here's where it gets personal. Think about how much of modern life runs on exactly the mechanism this ancient system is most afraid of: being seen and then, suddenly, not being seen. A read receipt with no reply. A social post that gets zero engagement. A friend group that quietly stops including you in plans. A coworker who stops CCing you on emails. None of these moments involve a predator. None of them threaten your food supply. And yet your body still floods with the same low-grade alarm your ancestors felt when the group's eyes slid past them at the fire. Researchers studying modern loneliness, building directly on Williams' ostracism work, have found that chronic social exclusion is linked to measurable increases in stress hormones and markers of inflammation. The body treating social disconnection almost like a physical wound that won't close. That's worth pausing on. The device in your pocket has created more opportunities for ambiguous social silence in a single day than your ancestors would have encountered in a lifetime. Every unanswered message is a tiny echo of the ancestral fire circle going quiet. Every notification that never comes is, to an alarm system still calibrated for a band of 30 people, indistinguishable from being quietly, deliberately written out of the group. Consider how many entirely new rituals of silence modern life has invented. Each one a perfect match for this ancient trigger. Being left on read. A dating match who simply stops replying, a practice now common enough to have its own word: ghosting. A job application that vanishes into silence instead of a rejection. None of these existed for your ancestors. There was no version of being ignored that happened at a distance, from someone you couldn't see, for reasons you'd never learn. And yet each one detonates the same ancient circuitry that once watched for eye contact around a fire, because your nervous system has no separate setting for stranger on an app versus member of the band you depend on to survive. It runs one program, built for one world, no matter which century it happens to wake up in. Understanding where this feeling comes from doesn't make it disappear, but it does change what you do with it. The urge to fix, apologize, over-explain, or chase after someone who's gone quiet isn't a personal flaw. It's hundreds of thousands of years of survival programming, misfiring in an environment it was never designed for. Recognizing that gives you something your ancestors never had the luxury of having: the ability to pause, notice the alarm for what it is, and choose whether it actually deserves your obedience this time. Not every silence is Bayham's ancient shunning ritual in disguise. Sometimes a message just sits unread on a busy day. Your ancient alarm can't tell the difference. You can, so the next time a room goes quiet when you walk in, or a message sits there unanswered for hours, notice the tightness in your chest for what it really is. It isn't proof that something is wrong with you. It's an alarm built for a world where being forgotten by your group meant the difference between life and death, still faithfully doing its job, in a world that finally, mostly, doesn't work that way anymore. You walk into a room. Someone glances up, then looks away. And somewhere underneath the sting of it, an ancient voice that once kept your ancestors alive is simply doing what it has always done, reminding you in the only language it has ever known that you were built from the very beginning to need to belong.